What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to do a full story video. A full story video is when I sit down and take a bunch of videos that tell one overarching story and combine them together into one big video. Now, today's full story video is going to be about identity crisis. As we all know, in the early 2000s, when it came to DC Comics, they gave us one heck of a storyline when it came to this event. The whole idea of who had killed off the wife of the elongated man, better known as Sue Dibney. And it led to so many other things happening that it would affect characters for a good while in DC Comics. Like, for example, Tim Drake was really affected by this actual event. But either way, today's full story video, I combine all the videos that tell the whole entire storyline of this event into one big video. And so I do hope you enjoy today's comic book video. Okay, so we're going to try something different on the channel. Now, I do want to say real quickly that we are still going to continue our coverage over Batman Night Quest. I'm not going to put that on hold, but after covering, the Thing Space Ranger story arc, I kind of felt like we were only doing Marvel comics on my channel. And I do know that for me personally, there are more Marvel fans out there than DC. So I was like, hey, let's do more Marvel comics. But I want to make sure that DC fans are still happy and being able to come on my channel and see different content that they actually like. And for a while, I had some DC fans out there begging me, asking me to sit down and cover Identity Crisis. Now, there have been other channels that have sat down and actually cover this huge, story arc, but I want to sit down and cover the main story arc and try to cover some of the tie-ins as well. Now, today's video, we're only covering the first issue of this actual event. And the reason why, because I want to show you guys how big it was when this first chapter came out. And you had a lot of people wondering where this story would possibly go. And really, when I sat down and read this book, I saw a lot of reviews out there that technically said that this event kind of pushed some of the boundaries when it came to DC Comics, making DC become a tad bit darker than it already was. But either way, let's go ahead and dive into the first chapter for Identity Crisis. And so as we dive into the opening pages for today's video, we actually pick up with the elongated man and also Firehawk. Now, both these characters have been around for a very good time in DC Comics, but the one character we're truly going to focus on in this chapter is the elongated man. And there is a very good reason why, because his wife is going to play a major role in this story arc. Now, the elongated man has been around for a very long time. I want to say since the 1960s, and he first appeared back in a Flash book. I want to say Flash issue number 112, but I could be wrong there. Either way, when it comes to the elongated man, he's currently on a stakeout with Firehawk because he got word that two criminals are trying to do some kind of sale on the black market, trying to get rid of one of Lex Luthor's power suits. Now, we do know that when it comes to the elongated man, he was on a lot of different teams when it came to the Justice League. But by this point, he had officially left the teams behind and had gone somewhat solo. But he brought Firehawk here to help out just in case things do go south when it comes to this whole trade. But now we have to jump over to Clark Kent. Now, something else I do want to mention, in the last section when it came to the elongated man and also Firehawk, that took place 30 minutes before the big moment. And so we're left to wonder what could be this big moment that's coming up very soon. But when we jump over to Smallville with Superman, it's now the present moment. And at first, it seems like a happy day. You have Clark Kent just, having a good old time with his parents. You have Ma Kent being very happy about the idea. Did I say Ma Kent? Ma Kent being very happy of the idea her son is being mentioned in the latest articles for the Daily Planet. But then out of nowhere, you have Clark get a call that freaks him out, that tells him he has to go now. And he tells his parents, hey, I gotta leave. And he quickly changes into his Superman outfit and flies away. But now we have to jump over to Gotham City, still the present moment, and we pick up with, Nightwing. And you have Nightwing just at the grave of his parents because it's the death or the anniversary of their death. And you have Starfire arrive. Now, something I should mention is that by this point in DC Comics, these two characters were not dating at all. But Starfire knew that he would be here on the anniversary of the death of his parents. But then you have those two guys get a call, just like Clark Kent did. And you have those two characters fly off to see what's happening. And that trend continues on when we pick up with Green Arrow, where you have Green Arrow just with his son, the other Green Arrow, having a good old time training. And then you have both those guys right there also get a call that freaks both of them out. And they both have to leave in a hurry. But now we have to jump over to the Elongated Man and also Firehawk. Now remember, with those two characters, they take place in the past before the big moment. And so when we jump back over to them, it's right now 15 minutes from the big moment in the present moment. And so we see the two characters continuing on their stakeout, watching the two criminals who are trying to sell Lex Luthor's armor suit. But we do see Firehawk begin to ask questions towards the Elongated Man. She wants to know how he was able to meet his wife, Sue. Now, it's honestly a great love story, but the main point of the love story was that she only saw him. And what I mean by that is there was a moment where you had him in the Flash appear in front of her in a crowd of people. And where you had the crowd of people focusing on the Flash because how amazing he was, she was the only person to focus on him, the Elongated Man. And that moment right there really began their whole entire love story, where they were able to begin to build a lovely relationship with one another. Now, something else I should mention is that the Elongated Man's secret identity is well known to the public, which means everyone knows who his wife is Sue Dibney. But either way, it still shows that in the superhero community, there is a possibility that you can have a lovely relationship. And so for Sue and also the Elongated Man, they were that perfect example. Now we do learn that the two crooks that you have the Elongated Man and Firehawk watching over with right now are supposed to meet up with a character known as Bolt. Now Bolt's been around for a very long time in DC Comics. He first appeared in Blue Devil issue number 6. Now of course that was pre-Crisis, but post-Crisis this was actually his first appearance in DC Comics post-Crisis. Now, we do learn that he is working alongside with another character known as the Calculator. Now, the Calculator is a very interesting bad guy, but he was trying to be the oracle for the supervillains, how Barbara Gordon is for superheroes, being able to give out information that bad guys might need. And so for Bolt, he wanted information about the two guys that he was supposed to meet up with to get the actual Lex Luthor war suit from. Now, he was supposed to buy the suit, but he does not plan on actually buying it. Instead, he plans on just taking it from them and using the suit for his own personal gain. And so now we know that he is somewhat involved in this story arc. Now, something we have to mention is that every year for the elongated man's birthday, you have Sue going out of her way to make sure that his birthday is a very fun and interesting birthday. And a lot of times she'll try to do all these different kind of detective work birthdays, lay out his whole case that he has to solve. And sometimes she might try to switch things up for his birthday, but either way, she's always going all out. And so today is his birthday, and we see her trying to get ready for it. But while at home making sure that everything is in place, she hears something coming from downstairs, and she kind of wonders what in the world is she hearing. Now, this leads into where we kind of get the idea of what identity crisis could be all about. And what I mean by that is, while you have Bolt trying to make the deal, the two thugs who are trying to sell Lex Luthor's suit off, you didn't have the elongated man and Firehawk wanting to move in. But he gets a call, and that call comes from his wife, and it's Sue calling out for help because somebody is assaulting her in their own home. And so you have the elongated man freaking out because he hears his wife dying on the call. But at the same time, Bolt, his deal is going south. What I mean by that is you have the two guys just begin to shoot at Bolt. Now, we are left to believe that Bolt is also going to die here as well. I'm going to tell you right now, that's not technically true. Bolt dies later on in a different story arc, like many years down the road when he came to DC Comics before the New 52. But either way, by the time you have the elongated man being able to make it back home to his house, he finds his dead wife. And bam, the whole event kicks off right here. And so with her death, you did have all these different heroes just stopping by the actual apartment of the elongated man and his wife to figure out who had killed Sue, because Sue was very important to all the different heroes in the superhero community. Now, something else I do want to mention, that their apartment was heavily protected by Justice League tech, meaning that it would be almost impossible for some kind of villain to easily break into the actual apartment. But that's the problem though. Somebody did, and they were able to get in, kill her off, and get out of there without leaving any kind of clues at all to possibly say who could be behind it. Now it's time for the funeral. And so as we dive into the funeral, and honestly guys, this is a huge moment because you do have all the different heroes coming together to celebrate the life of Sue. Now, the reason why I say celebrate, because usually you do have people say that funerals are used to celebrate the life of someone who has passed, but also to grieve for the person who has passed. But now the question is, can our heroes truly celebrate her life? Because she was taken away in the most messed up kind of way. And we kind of find out that she was pregnant, that she was going to tell the elongated man that they were finally going to be parents, that he was going to be a father. She was going to tell him on his birthday. And so can we actually say that our heroes came here to celebrate her life when her life was cut short? Now, you do have all the different heroes being able to do different things to help out with the funeral. For example, you do have Wonder Woman go up there and, do a very powerful speech. But then when it comes time for the elongated man, he can't do a speech because this man lost his wife and now his unborn child. He breaks down in front of everyone, but everyone truly understands. Now, after the funeral, you then have all the different heroes being able to rejoin their superhero groups to kind of go out of their way to figure out which villain it could have been who killed off Sue. Because with the elongated man being part of different superhero teams over the years, mostly just the different versions of the Justice League, well, he did make some enemies. Those teams did make some enemies. So one of those bad guys out there most likely tried to come after him to get revenge against him. And for those bad guys, the best way to do it was to kill off his wife. Now, after you have all the different superhero teams go their separate ways, well, it all comes down to 5 heroes being left behind to have a private meeting with the Elongated Man, Hawkman, Captain Atom, Green Arrow, Black Canary, Zatanna, and they all go back into the secret room at the church to have a conversation with him. And really, the conversation is him saying, listen, I need your help to find somebody for me. I think I figure out who it was who had basically killed off my wife. And it has to be no other than Dr. Light. And okay, so getting back into our coverage over Identity Crisis, this is where things get pretty dark. I mean, it started off dark when it came to Identity Crisis, but it gets even darker. We also learn here why you have the Elongated Man and also other members of the League wanting to go after a certain character known as Dr. Light. And so today's video, we're going to cover issues number 2 and 3 in our coverage over Identity Crisis. Now, there are a couple of things we have to remember when it comes to Identity Crisis. The first is that this whole event is about who killed off the wife of the Elongated Man. Her name was Sue Dibney. Now, all we know is that she was killed in her own apartment while waiting for her husband, the Elongated Man, to come back to celebrate his birthday. Now, after that, you then had him and also other superheroes give her a proper funeral. But after her funeral, you then had different heroes group up to go after different enemies who may have wanted to come after the Elongated Man. But then we had a small group of characters actually meet up in the back of the church because he believes that he actually knows who was the killer. Now, the characters he believes that he can actually trust is Zatanna, Captain Atom, Hawkman, Green Arrow, Black Canary, because they were all together on the Justice League. Now, here's the thing. He believes it is Dr. Light. Now, before we are able to actually talk about who or why Dr. Light was the one that killed off Sue Dibney, we see Hawkman realize that there's someone in the room watching them, and that would be Wally West. Wally West realized that all the other heroes left to go after different enemies who had possibly did this to Sue. But this small group of heroes did not leave. And for Wally, he wanted to know why. Now, he's also with Kyle Rayner as well. And really, this is a callback to the idea that Wally and Kyle are the latest Flash and Green Lantern at this time in DC Comics. Of course, replacing both Barry Allen and also Hal Jordan. Now, with that being said, you have Wally wanting to know, why were these other characters meeting up here in the back of the church? And why are they going after Dr. Light? Now, most of the characters in the room do not want to tell Wally nor Kyle what happened in the past and why they believe it was Dr. Light. But you didn't have them say, you know what? It's time for them to know. But we're going to tell them as we make our way over to a certain location. And so this is where you have the actual event begin to push some boundaries, because we learned that there was a moment in time where the entire league was not at the watchtower. But you know who was? Sue, the wife of the Elongated Man. She was there by herself, and Dr. Light was able to find a way onto the actual watchtower. Now, once he was able to get there, he recognized her because the world knew the true identity of the Elongated Man and also his wife. And so for Dr. Light, she was an unfortunately an easy target. And so you had Dr. Light do some horrible things to her. Now, she was able to call out for help by hitting a button, but the problem was the entire league, they were on Earth. They were away from the watchtower. And so by the time you had Barry Allen being able to make it there to actually help her out, it already happened. And then the rest of the league arrived. By the way, this is a flashback. So it took place back in time where we had Barry Allen as the Flash and Hal Jordan as the Green Lantern. Either way, like I said, by the time they got there, it was already too late. Now, you did have our heroes beat down on him, and they were able to take her over to the hospital, but for the elongated man, he truly believes it was Dr. Light who killed off his wife because of what happened in the past. Now, after you had the elongated man take his wife over to the hospital, you had the rest of the league stay behind. Now, this is the point where you kind of have the actual party, Wally West, and the other heroes kind of go back and forth on was this the right move or the wrong move? And let me explain, because after you had the elongated man take his wife to the hospital, you had the rest of the league stay behind with Dr. Light. Now, you had that group decide that the best option to make sure that Dr. Light would never do something like this again to any other women across the world, they came together and said, hey, Zatanna should use her magic on his mind to alter his mind, to make him a tad bit different, so that he will no longer have that personality that wants to go after other women and actually assault them. Now, again, for some of the heroes, it's kind of wrong because they were invading his mind, but at the same time, they're trying to protect other women, especially other women who may be close to other heroes. And so for Wally West, he cannot believe that like Barry Allen would actually agree to that, but Barry did, and so did Hal. Now, while you have our heroes telling that story over to Wally West and also Kyle Rayner, we kind of have to jump over to the Injustice Gang satellite. They had their own base out in space. Now, by this point in DC Comics, it's not currently being used by the Injustice Gang. It's being used by a bunch of random villains as a hangout spot, or possibly an area where if you are an assassin looking for your next job, you can go there and possibly find your next job there. Now, with that being said, while you have our villains hanging out, we do shift our focus over to Merlin. And really, Merlin is not really that important for this section. Just know that he's trying to tell us what has been going on the actual satellite after the actual Injustice Gang had left it behind. But while he's trying to explain things to us, Dr. Light appears up there because he was sent there by the Calculator. Now, we had talked about the Calculator in our last video. Around his time in DC Comics, he was trying to be like Oracle, being able to give out information to villains when they need it. Of course, you have to pay him first before you were able to get that info, but he was trying to be the Oracle for the bad guys out there in DC Comics. But he told Dr. Light, you better go up to the satellite and find an assassin who can actually protect you. Telling you right now, you better use a lot of money to hire the best one, because apparently the Calculator knew that sooner or later the Justice League would be coming after Dr. Light to arrest him. Now, let's not forget that his mind was altered, so he has no idea why they would be trying to come after him for. Now, when we jump back over to our heroes, they're still at the house of Dr. Light. They're about to actually break into his house to hopefully find him. Now, when it came to the scene we saw a moment ago where it was Dr. Light asking for help, that took place just moments before this scene right here. Now, we do learn that the elongated man, he had no idea that the rest of the league did that after he took his wife over to the hospital. But at the same time, it's kind of like, are you really upset by it? Because in reality, they made sure that man would never have the ability to do that again to another woman. Either way, you do have our heroes begin to head over to the home of Dr. Light, sorry. Now, once you have our heroes being able to actually reach the door of Dr. Light, there's a huge blast, sending everyone away. And the reason why? Because we do learn that Dr. Light was able to hire somebody, and that somebody is, well, Deathstroke. And of course, this makes a lot of sense. If you want to make sure that you are well protected from the League, you hire the best man for the job. And the best man for the job is Deathstroke. Now we jump over to Bruce Wayne because you have Bruce, well, being Bruce Wayne, where you have Bruce looking over the body of Sue Dibney. Now, here's the thing. You have our heroes also believe that it was Dr. Light because she was badly burned. So besides the past assault he did to her, is also the idea that the heroes believed that she was burned by Dr. Light, heavily burned. But you have Batman say, that's not the case. Like, she died before she was properly burned, which means Dr. Light could have not been the killer, which means right now the League is going after the wrong man. Now, Oracle was able to tell Batman that she found out what they're up to, but you also have Oracle realize that Batman is saying the League is going after the wrong guy, which means they're only making things worse. Now, as we dive into the third chapter of Identity Crisis, most of the first few pages of this book is really our heroes fighting against Deathstroke. Now, can I say this is a great moment in the book because it really shows how great Deathstroke is. Like, you would think, okay, with this lineup, there's no way that he should be able to win. But that's the catch, though. You see, Deathstroke is the best assassin in the world, the best mercenary in the world. This man is always prepared. He knows what to do to each and every single one of them. And so you have Deathstroke being able to take them all out. And really, by the end of this section, it kind of seems like, okay, Deathstroke is going to be able to take them all out and go on with his day. And our heroes, unfortunately, are just going to have to take the butt kicking. Except that is the moment where you didn't have Green Arrow being able to come up from behind Deathstroke and actually take one of his arrows and put it in the eye socket of Slade Wilson. Now, if you know your history of Deathstroke, you know it's a huge no-no. And the reason why, because that was where his wife shot him. Now, with that being said, you didn't have the entire group trying their best to hold this man down, to make sure that he can finally be defeated but not get away. Except while they were doing that, Dr. Light begins to remember everything that happened back with Sue. Because remember, Zatanna said she's going to use her magic to play with his mind, to kind of make him forget everything he did. And so he begins to remember. And once he realizes what the heroes have done to him, he gets very upset and wants to explode. Except luckily for our heroes, Superman had arrived just in time. Now, once you have Superman being able to calm everybody down, this is where we kind of learn that Dr. Light was not the only bad guy to have his mind altered. We're beginning to learn that there were other characters in the past who also had their minds altered as well by the Justice League, by Zatanna. Now, something I should also mention is that not every single hero knows what happened to Dr. Light. It was only this group of characters. Now, for Wally, he wants to know, why did they do this for? Like, why did they begin to alter the minds of certain bad guys around the world? What exactly went down? You see, we learned that back in the past, the early days of the Justice League, there was a moment in time you had this group called the Secret Society of Supervillains being able to switch bodies with our heroes. And they began to learn the true identities of all these different heroes. Now, once you have our heroes being able to regain their bodies, they were still scared because now their bad guys knew their secret identities. They can now go after the different people that our heroes care so much for. And so because of that moment, you then had this group of characters decided that it would be best to alter the minds of all those different people, because these bad guys, they don't care about you at all. They'll go after your loved ones, kill them, and then after doing that, go grab a bite to eat like they did nothing wrong. And so for Oliver Queen, he's trying to tell Wally West, like, hey, you have to understand why we did this for. But now we have to jump over to Captain Boomerang. Now, when we do, we see that this is a man who's at his lowest point in his life. Now, usually for Captain Boomerang, he's always fighting the Flash, always part of the Suicide Squad, always part of some kind of team. But by this point in DC Comics, the man has reached his lowest point in life. Now, here's the thing. You see, he's trying to find a job, trying to find somebody who would actually hire him. Now, I'm not talking about like, an actual job. I'm talking more like mercenary work. Either way, he calls up the calculator hoping that he will know somebody who could possibly hire Captain Boomerang. But unfortunately, you have the calculator tell Captain, like, nobody wants to hire you. Now, we are told that no one wants to hire him for what he has done. And we're not really told what he did. Now, we do see him outside the house of his son that was adopted by some people after him and Golden Glider, a different character, had him. And so for Calculator, he says, if you want me to believe that you were able to get back on your feet and complete jobs, do this one thing for me. Go say hi to your son that you gave up for adoption. But for Captain Boomerang, he can't do it. He's kind of like, no, I can't. I'm too scared. And he shuts down. And so this kid named Owen Mercer will not know at this point in time that he was just talking to his biological father. But yeah, for Captain Boomerang, he has reached his lowest point. Now we jump over to Tim Drake, and you have Tim Drake coming back home after a long day being Robin, but also being on the Teen Titans. Now, he always tried his best to use makeup to hide all his different scars and bruises from his hero life from his father. Now, his father knows that he is Robin, and really for Jack Drake, he wants his son to quit being Robin, but he understands why Tim does it for. Now, the ending of the third issue is really important. The reason why, because we jump over to the home of Ray Palmer, better known as the Atom. Now, we actually see we see his wife, Jean Loring, being attacked. And so now, another loved one, somebody close to a hero, is being killed off. Now, luckily for her, she was able to call up her ex-husband, because around this time in DC Comics, these two characters were actually divorced. But either way, at least she is able to call out for her ex-husband. But the question is now, will he get there in time to save her life? And this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later. Okay, so it's time for us to dive back into our coverage over Identity Crisis. And now we pick up the fourth issue of this actual main storyline. Now, we're only covering one more chapter because we have to dive back into some more tie-ins when it comes to identity crisis. Now, the fourth chapter does pick up where the last chapter actually left off at. You see, at the end of the last chapter, we had saw that somebody was able to break into the home of Jean Loring. Now, Jean Loring is actually the ex-wife to Captain Adam. The problem is someone was able to break into her home and begin the process of trying to hang her. Now, luckily for her, she was on the phone with Captain Adam. And so he was able to use his powers as a way to travel through the phone line to arrive in the apartment just in time to use his powers once again to break the rope. Now, at first, it did look like, okay, he was too late and she is officially dead. We do see that he was able to save her life at the very last second to bring her back to life. But the problem is now is that is now two loved ones of superheroes who have been attacked. And Jean was almost the second victim, meaning that she was almost killed off. Now, for Jean Loring, it's kind of like that's a huge problem because she has the same kind of security that Sue Dibney had, the wife of the elongated man. And so somebody is able to bypass all kinds of different types of security to be able to break into the home of a loved one of a superhero. But now the problem is, who's next? Because now it seems like they're going after anybody who may be related to a superhero. Now, after Jean Loring had been saved by Captain Adam, you didn't have other heroes arrive at her apartment to kind of begin their detective work, to try to figure out what exactly went down here, like who it could possibly be going out of their way to target different loved ones of different superheroes. Now, for me personally, this kind of shows how serious things had become because you have Superman there, right? Now, Clark was there in the earlier chapters, but this time, we're actually focusing on Clark a whole lot more than we did in the earlier chapters because you have Clark now being very upset that that's now two loved ones of two different heroes who have been attacked in 4 days, which means that sooner or later, other loved ones of other heroes might be attacked. For example, Lois Lane. And so for Clark Kent, he was able to examine the rope and realize what kind of knot was used on the rope. He said, hey, this kind of knot is only used by a certain group of people. Now, thanks to Oracle, she was able to figure out which villain might have used that kind of knot, a character known as Slipknot. And so for Clark, he tells Green Arrow, I need you to get somebody to go down there and talk to Slipknot because that man might be the key to figure out who may be behind all of this mess. But the way Clark said it, you can kind of tell that he is so serious that even Batman might be scared of him as well. Now, for Green Arrow, he knew that there's only one person you can call when it comes to gathering information from somebody, and that would be Wonder Woman. Now, when she arrives, Slipknot at first kind of like, listen, there's nothing you can do to me at all. But then she brings out the lasso of truth. And we already know when the lasso of truth comes out, you are about to spill all your guts to someone very soon. And so for Wonder Woman, she said, you're going to talk to me and tell me everything I need to know when it comes to the idea of who is actually attacking our friends and their loved ones. We do learn that after hours had passed by with Wonder Woman kind of interrogating Slipknot, they were unable to get any kind of information out of him. Now, for Oracle, she does tell our heroes that the only connection that Dr. Light and Slipknot have is that they were both part of the Suicide Squad. Now, for Superman, that is a lead right there. But for Green Arrow, it's not a strong lead at all. Now, like I said earlier, you can kind of tell that things got more serious when you have Superman being involved in your event a whole lot more than usual. Because in the earlier chapters, he was kind of there, but not really. But in this chapter, he's there. He's kind of like, no, I want to know what in the world is going on here. Because for him, he's afraid of the idea that somebody might go after Lois Lane, that somebody might go after his parents. And so you have Green Arrow say, no, Clark, like, unfortunately, the Suicide Squad is not a strong lead. Now, for Clark, he's kind of like, do not take that tone with me at all. But you have Oliver say, Clark, you have to realize that we are now panicking. And as soon as the other side realize that we're out here panicking, sooner or later, they're going to try to take that as a way to get an advantage over us. And so right now, when it comes to our detective work, we need to be on our A game. Now, for Green Arrow, you would think like, okay, he's right. But in reality, you have the other side, the villains right now, being scared about the idea of being out there because they have been hearing the rumors about what the heroes have been doing, that the heroes have been going after different bad guys across the world. And some heroes are doing some serious damage to those bad guys across the world. And so you have a group of bad guys kind of like, hey, listen, I'm hoping the heroes sooner or later find the person who had basically started all this mess. And when they do, everything can finally go back to normal. And so, technically, right now, you have both sides just panicking. They're afraid of the other side. Now, when it comes to Identity Crisis, it was also playing around with the idea of Captain Boomerang having a son, and that would be Owen Mercer. Now, down the road, Owen Mercer would actually replace his father as Captain Boomerang. But when it came to Owen, at first, we were kind of left to believe that he was actually the son to Captain Boomerang, the first one, and also Golden Glider. But down the road in DC Comics, they had a retcon saying that actually, when it comes to Owen Mercer, he is related to the Flash family. Now, I'm not really going to dive too deeper than that for this video. Just know that Owen Mercer is actually the son for the original Captain Boomerang. Now, we do learn that when it comes to Owen, he had no idea that his father was actually Captain Boomerang because he was adopted. He never met his biological parents. But thanks to different newspapers talking about him, he was able to learn the actual truth. But you also have Captain Boomerang finally working up the courage to go talk to his son. And so now you have these two characters being able to build that father and son relationship. Now, I want to jump over to Batman. Here's the reason why. Because you have Alfred inform Batman that the other heroes are beginning to think the Suicide Squad were the ones who were actually targeting Sue Dibney and Jean Loring. But you have Batman say no. And here's the reason why. Because to him, it has to be somebody who could actually benefit off the death of those two characters. Now, technically, only one died and one had barely survived. But for Batman, he has to play the mind game of somebody out there who could possibly benefit off the death of those two people. And so for Batman, it really cannot be the Suicide Squad. It has to be somebody else. And so it kind of digs deeper into the whole idea of who is actually the person going around targeting the different loved ones of the different superheroes in the superhero community. But now we have to jump over to Oliver Queen going over to the grave of Hal Jordan. Now, this takes place before you had Jeff Johns actually take over the Green Lantern book. And the reason why I'm saying that because before you had Jeff Johns take over the Green Lantern book, Hal Jordan was actually the Spectre, God's vengeance. And so for Oliver Queen, it's kind of like, if I want to figure out who had killed off Sue Dibney, who had tried to kill off Jean Loring, the best person to go to would be Hal Jordan. And so you have Oliver going over to him like, hey, so I don't know if you know who target our friends. Like, do you know? But the problem is for Hal, he can't tell Oliver because he is not allowed to, because he answers to a higher power, of course, talking about God. And so for Oliver, it's kind of like, what you're telling me is that we're just stuck until we are able to do the right detective work to figure out who's going around targeting our friends. We're just basically screwed. And for Hal, it's kind of like, yeah, dude, you're screwed. I'm sorry. I am just God's vengeance. And unfortunately, I answer to him. But now we have to jump over to Lois Lane. Now, for me personally, this is one heck of a cliffhanger. And here's the reason why. Because as we saw so far, they're now targeting loved ones of different superheroes. And so we already knew that sooner or later, that could possibly mean like Batman, Superman, or some other hero. And so for Clark Kent, it seems like somebody out there actually knows that he is Superman, which means that they know that Lois Lane is, of course, close to Superman. And so while she's at work, she gets a letter. And when it comes to that letter, it tells her, like, hey, we know that Clark Kent is Superman. But on top of that, we want to tell you that you're next. And this is where we are going to end today's comic book. Okay, so it's time for us to continue our coverage over Identity Crisis. Now, we're going to cover the fifth chapter of the main storyline, but I also want to tell you guys that we're getting to the tail end of our coverage over Identity Crisis. We only have a few more tie-ins to cover and then two more chapters of the main storyline, but we're almost at the very end of our coverage over Identity Crisis. Now, with that being said, getting back into the main storyline, we actually pick up with different members of the League. Now, this is getting very intense. And what I mean by that is you now have all hands on deck because different loved ones of different superheroes who are part of the superhero community are being attacked. Sue Didney was killed off. Jean Loring was actually attacked in her own home. But in the last chapter of the main storyline, we had saw that Lois Lane got a letter saying that they know that Clark Kent is Superman, and they know that, well, she's with him. And so now you have all heroes freaking out because now even Superman's loved ones are being attacked. And so you have all hands on deck. We see Green Arrow, Superman, Green Lantern, Flash going after a group of bad guys. And really, this is happening all over the world because it's not just the Justice League. You're also talking about the idea of the Titans, the Outsiders, the Reserves, even the JSA. You have all hands on deck here. Now, originally, they were going after bad guys who may have an actual reason to go after the different loved ones of the superheroes and superhero community. But now it seems like they're just going after anybody who might have just a small piece of information that could possibly help them. And so we see all hands on deck from all different teams in the superhero community. But now we have to jump over to the death of Firestorm. Now, really, it happens very quickly in this book, but let's go ahead and talk about it. You see, for Firestorm, he was fighting alongside with other heroes, going after a character known as Shadow Thief. The problem is, Shadow Thief was able to grab a sword and stab Firestorm. Now, Firestorm is a nuclear reactor character, meaning that if anything happens to his suit, he can go nuclear when he explodes. And so with him now being stabbed and suit being damaged, he realized that he is going to explode. It will be a nuclear explosion. And so he has no choice but to go away and fly away before he explodes, killing everybody in the area. But he knows that he is going to die. But now we have to jump over to Captain Atom. Now, in an earlier chapter, when it comes to Identity Crisis, we had saw that his, ex-wife, Jean Loring, was actually attacked. Now, of course, he made it in time to save her life, but it's kind of like the beginning of these two characters maybe getting back together because he's staying around her the entire time, making sure nothing else happens to her, but also want to make sure that she is okay because she was literally on the verge of death. But while you have the two characters talking, we kind of see the two of them kind of like, hey, I miss you, you miss me, that was a very close call. And it helped me realize that maybe we should be together, that maybe we can work things out and try this again one more time. And so by the end of this section, you do have the two characters actually begin to make out, and Captain Atom might get his wife back, actually. Now, in the earlier chapters of this story arc, we had learned that Captain Boomerang had a son, and that son was Owen Mercer. Now, we were left to believe that Owen Mercer's mother was Golden Glider, but this section right here proves that that's not really the case, because while you have Owen hanging out with his father trying to learn how to use trick weapons, well, one of the weapons he's using is about to kill off his father. And so the very last second, he was able to use super speed. That really shows that Owen Mercer is not the son to Golden Glider. He's still the son to Captain Boomerang, but that means his mother is somebody else, somebody who has super speed. But now we have to jump over to Tim Drake and Jack Drake. Now, this is a really important moment in the world of DC Comics, especially for Batman comics. And the reason why, because this is the death of Jack Drake. You see, in Batman comics, usually, if you're going to be a Robin, that means that you are going to lose your parents. And so for Dick Grayson and Jason Todd, it happened like that, and Batman took them in. But for Tim, by this point in DC Comics, it seemed that it was going to be different because he still had his father. Now, his mom died a while back, but he still had his father. Except his dad also knew that he was Robin. He knew that Tim was out there being Robin and hanging out with Batman and the other superheroes in the superhero community. But by this point, for Jack Drake, he's very concerned for Tim. And the reason why, because the public knows what happened to Sue Dibney. The public knows what happened to Jean Loring. But the problem is, the public does not know what happened to Lois Lane. But Jack can tell that something is wrong with Tim, because now Tim is more concerned if someone knows that Lois Lane is close to Superman. That's like big top level secret right there. And so it's Tim right now trying to stay calm. But for Jack, he can tell there's something wrong with Tim. But at the same time, he's scared that something might happen to Tim and asking Tim to stay here with him. But you have Tim say, no, I gotta go. But if anything happens, just call Oracle. She'll call me and I'll be back here in a hurry. The problem is, right after Tim leaves, Jack finds a package. Inside that package, there's a note that technically says they know that Jack Drake is the father to Tim Drake. And so the ending of this chapter alone is the actual death of Jack Drake, because you didn't have Jack call up Oracle. Oracle calls up Tim. Tim's with Batman. They're in the Batmobile, and you have Batman trying his best to get back over to Jack Drake in time. But the problem is, the killer is already at the house. The killer is already inside the house. And we do learn that it is actually Captain Boomerang, who was actually hired by the Calculator. Now, the Calculator is trying to be the oracle for the villains out there, being able to give out jobs, but to also give out information when it's needed. But either way, for Jack Drake, he knows that, well, his killer is nearby. And so he has the gun in his hand, and you have Oracle being able to put the call through to Tim. And you have Tim telling his father, like, hey, Dad, we're almost there. Like, please just stay hidden or give us some more time. We're almost there. Please don't do anything. But for Jack, he knows that it's too late. Like, Captain Boomerang is around the corner. And so you have Jack pop out and he fires twice with his gun, shooting Captain Boomerang right in the chest. But he was also able to throw his boomerang, hitting Jack in the chest. And so at the very end of this chapter, we see both men just laying there dead. That is the death of Jack Drake in the world of DC Comics. Guys, it's time for us to cover the last two chapters of Identity Crisis. Now, here's the thing. The last two chapters of the main storyline is not the actual end of our coverage over this event. You see, there were two epilogues that took place right after the last chapter of this event. Now, one of the epilogues does focus on the Teen Titans, and the other one does focus on the JSA. Now, we might not cover the JSA one, but most definitely we're going to cover the Teen Titans one. Now, with that being said, the next two chapters of the main storyline is just beautiful, but we kind of find out who had killed off Sue Dibney. We finally figure out who is the actual killer, but we also learn a very dark secret when it comes to Batman. Now, as we dive into the sixth chapter of this storyline, it does pick up the fifth chapter left off at. Now, remember, in the fifth chapter, at the very end, we got the death of Jack Drake, the father to Tim Drake. He was killed off by Captain Boomerang. Now, for Jack Drake, he was also able to get a shot off, which did kill off Captain Boomerang. And so both characters died. But as we dive into the sixth chapter, we pick up with Tim Drake just taking off his Robin outfit so that he's able to go be with his father. The police are going to be there very soon, but either way, it's Tim Drake being heartbroken because now his father is dead. His mom died back in the 1990s, but now his dad is gone. Both of his parents are now officially dead in DC Comics. This is a young boy who has to go through one of the worst things you can go through in life at a very young age. We also have to remember that when it comes to Captain Boomerang, he had a son, and his son's name is Owen Mercer. And so for Owen, he got a call that his dad is dead. And so he rushed over to the scene of the crime. The problem is, though, unlike Tim Drake, Owen is not allowed to be near his father's dead body. And the reason why? Because this officer is scared of the idea of possibly Owen being able to bring his father back to life. Because when it comes to the rogues, they always find a way to come back to life after being gone for a good period of time. And so for this officer, he's kind of like, no, we cannot allow you to be near the body of your father because you might try to bring him back. Now for Owen, he is so upset about the fact that his dad is dead, but also he's not allowed to be near his father's body, but Batman is. Now with Batman, he's just doing some detective work, but he did find a note that said, protect yourself. The same note Jack Drake saw on top of a box. And of course, inside that box was a gun, the same gun he used to kill off Captain Boomerang. Now the next few pages are really showing us the heroes are different heroes and different villains kind of dealing with the fact that they all had lost somebody. Mothers, daughters, sons, brothers, sisters, grandma, grandpas, and even friends. Now, the last page of this section alone is going into a tie-in that we had already covered that takes place in Flash issue number 217. In that issue, it's really more of Owen picking up where his father left off at, becoming the new Captain Boomerang. Now we do get a page for Dr. Light alone. Now remember, when it came to Dr. Light, we had learned that there was a small group of heroes inside the League that had decided to use the powers of Zatanna to wipe the mind of Dr. Light. And the reason why, because we had learned a long time ago that Dr. Light had assaulted Sue Dibney, the wife to the elongated man, the woman who got murdered at the very beginning of this story arc. Now, with all that being said, our heroes realize that if they don't play with the mind of Dr. Light, then most likely he'll try to assault other women around the world. Now, he had forgotten about what he did to Sue Dibney, but then he was able to remember everything. And so this one page kind of hints at the idea that he might go after different members of the League who have played with his mind. And matter of fact, it does lead into one of the epilogues we might cover, the Teen Titans one. Now, this kind of leads into a big moment for the character of Batman. Let me explain why. So like I said earlier, you had some heroes inside the League who had decided to use the powers of Zatanna to play with the mind of Dr. Light. Now, here's the thing. Dr. Light now remembers everything, but when he was trying to remember everything he had forgotten, he was kind of using his powers to show off light images of things that he had forgotten. And Wally West was nearby and he saw those images. And so for Wally West, he realized that Green Arrow had lied to him again because Green Arrow said there was only 7 heroes that day when it came to Zatanna playing with the mind of Dr. Light. But then Wally West realized there was an 8th person, and that person was Batman. And so you have Wally ask Oliver, hey, why did you lie again? Like, why did you not tell me that Bruce was there as well? And Bruce was down with the fact of y'all playing with the mind of Dr. Light. But then you have Green Arrow begin to act weird. And that's when Wally West realized they also did something to Bruce Wayne. And we kind of find out that they had altered his mind as well, because that same day you had those heroes using the powers of Zatanna to play with the mind of Dr. Light. Bruce Wayne came back to the Watchtower because he got word that something had happened to Sue Dibney. And so when he arrived back at the Watchtower, he saw Zatanna playing with the mind of Dr. Light. And Batman realized he had to do something. And so you had Zatanna use her powers to freeze Batman right in his tracks. But then she used her magic to make him forget what he saw. And so it's Wally West realizing that once again, Oliver Queen had lied to him. But on top of that, he's kind of like, you guys mess with the mind of Batman. You don't do that. Now, for Oliver, he believes that if it was Batman in his shoes, Bruce would have done the same thing as well. But you have Wally say, no, Batman would never do that at all. But you didn't have Wally realize that sooner or later, when it comes to Batman, he's going to remember. Or possibly he already does. But he has not said anything at all yet. But either way, it's Wally West once again being very disappointed when it comes to Oliver Queen. And really, we do shift our focus over to Batman. Now, here's the thing, because you have Batman right now trying to hunt down the Calculator. Now, the Calculator was kind of like the oracle for bad guys in DC Comics, being able to sell pieces of information for, well, money. But on top of that, he was also being able to give different bad guys jobs to do across the world. Like Captain Boomerang. He was hired by Calculator to go after Jack Drake. Now, for a Calculator, he tells us that somebody else put the hit on Jack Drake. It was just him hiring Captain Boomerang to go after Jack Drake. Now, when it comes to Calculator, he has no idea who put the hit out on Jack Drake. Now, for Batman, he believes he is getting very close into finding Calculator. But when he walks into the room, he finds out that his target is not there at all. He knew that Batman was coming and left a note behind to say, hey, we're not all morons. Some of us are really smart here, Batman. But now we have to jump over to the headquarters of the JSA. Now, when we do, we pick up with Dr. Midnight and also good old Mr. Terrific. Now, you have these two characters doing an autopsy on the body of Sue Dibney. Now, remember, our heroes still have no idea how she had officially died. But right now, they're going to find out because they realize that somebody has stopped the blood going to her brain. But on top of that, they found footprints on her brain, very small footprints. And they're kind of wondering, how in the world does footprints get on her brain? Somebody will have to shrink down in size to get to her brain. And we jump over to Batman because Batman realized who it could possibly be. And we realized it could be Ray Palmer, better known as Captain Atom. And so as we dive into the final chapter for Identity Crisis, we learn that it wasn't Ray Palmer who had killed off Sue Dibney, the wife of the elongated man. Matter of fact, it was Jean Loring, the ex-wife of Captain Atom. Now, here's the thing. The only reason why we find out it was her because, well, Batman says it's her, but also because she mentioned the fact that a note was left behind for Jack Drake to use the gun against Captain Boomerang. But for Captain Atom, he's kind of like, wait a second, how did you know about the note? The note was not in the paper. It was not in the news. Batman took the note and did the heck out of there. And so for Ray Palmer, he realized that the only way she would have known if she was there is she's the one behind everything that has been happening to all the different loved ones of the superhero community. It's basically her. Then he realized how she killed off Sue Dibney. She found one of his suits laying around and took that suit and used it against Sue Dibney. And so once he was able to put all those different pieces together, she begins to apologize to confirm that yes, she was the killer. She's the one who had killed off Sue Dibney. Now, this leads into the whole idea of why did she do it? Like, why in the world did she kill off her dear friend Sue Dibney? Because they were close friends. But it all goes back to the fact that she is the ex-wife of Ray Palmer. The whole idea of being an ex-wife. She wanted Ray back, but she had no idea of how to get him back. And so that is why she killed off Sue Dibney. Now, technically, her idea was to only scare Sue Dibney so that she'll call in the different heroes. And once the heroes had arrived at the apartment to see that Sue is okay, those other heroes would then be concerned for their loved ones. And for Ray, his loved ones is her and their son. And so she was kind of hoping that after all of that, he'll run back to her and they can be a couple again. But everything fell apart when she tried to suit on Sue Dibney and basically blocked the blood going into her brain, killing off Sue Dibney. Now, she also brought other weapons with her just in case things went south. And so she used those weapons as a way to burn the body of Sue Dibney. And so now everything is coming together. But for Ray Palmer, he realized that Bruce kept asking the same question over and over again. If you kill somebody, you have to make sure that you would benefit off their death. And so for Batman, it's kind of like, who would kill off Sue Dibney and be able to benefit off her death? And so for Ray, he realized it had to be Loring. It had to be her because, again, she wanted him back in her life. Now, when it comes to Jack Drake, she did not plan on him dying. Matter of fact, she was kind of hoping in the idea that Jack Drake would be able to be used as a way to throw the heroes off, but also using Captain Boomerang as a way to throw the heroes off as well. And with the heroes being thrown off, no one would expect her being the killer. But things went south when Jack Drake died. And of course, as we all know, she had to open up her big mouth and say, hey, did Batman figure out who wrote the note? And it all came together once again. Now, for Jean Loring, she believes that she's the wife of Ray Palmer. There's no way he'll attack her. There's no way he'll lock her up. She believes that in the possibility she'll get away with this because, again, she is his wife. But as we go over to the next section, we see that he brought her over to Arkham Asylum. It's kind of like, man, that's the worst place you could place her in. But at the same time, he had no choice. He had to go ahead and lock her up because she is a killer. She killed off a close friend of theirs. And so he walks away. But you can tell this is a man who is completely broken now. But now we pick up 1 week later. Now, 1 week later, we do pick up with Wally West and Oliver Queen having another conversation at the Watchtower. Now, this leads into the idea of talking about Bruce Wayne once again. Because for Wally West, they should just go ahead and tell Bruce Wayne what they have done to him. But for Oliver Queen, it's kind of like, no, we should not. But also, like I told you in the past, most likely, knowing Batman, he already knows what had happened to him and waiting for the right moment to bring it up. And really for me, we kind of end the video on that note right there. There were a few more sections as well, but really it's more Wally West having an opportunity to tell Bruce Wayne that what happened to him thanks to Zatanna, but Wally does not tell Bruce at all. And there was an epilogue, but it's really more of the elongated man trying his best to move on, but also kind of talking to the spirit of his wife, believing that she's around him no matter what. And the book kind of ends on that note. So, with that being said, guys, this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But, guys, see y'all next time. Later.